So we're going to talk about motivation, and I'll start by just describing what Agile people is, because maybe you have no previous experience from Agile people. So Agile people is a community, a worldwide community with people who believe in a better way when it comes to how we run organizations in a complex world. In Agile people, we are all passionate about combining Agile and people to create conditions for a workplace where people feel happy and have what they need to perform in an optimal manner, you could say. And we have taken the values and principles from the Agile Manifesto. We have mixed with the modern Agile framework. We spiced it up with our own Agile People Manifesto that you find on agilepeoplemanifesto.org. And from there, we created 35 principles that we believe that all organizations, regardless of size or industry, need to increase. But today, we are not going to talk about the 35 Agile People principles. Today, we are going to talk about motivation and employee engagement. Why do people do what they do? What has that to do with basic needs? So how do we see, what is really employee engagement if we look at it? It's actually an equation between employee satisfaction and organizational contribution. And here you can see that one is not enough. It's not either or, it's always both. For example, if you're just a satisfied employee, like in this picture, it would be high value on the x-axis. You are certainly happy, but you don't contribute a lot to the organization's goals and the vision. We can call them honeymooners or happy sleepers. And if you are only contributing to the organization's goals, always hitting the targets every month, that would be high values on the y-axis in this picture, you probably don't feel very good. We call these employees crash and burners. So when you have high values on both employee satisfaction and organizational contribution, you are a highly engaged employee. And how do we create those highly engaged employees? It's by creating a system where people can achieve both, and by understanding their basic needs and helping them to fulfill them. This is what engagement is all about, the system and the needs of the people. So if we can create those conditions for motivation and engagement, we will have happier also and more loyal customers who will contribute more to the profit of the company, and a profitable business is almost always necessary to reach the purpose or dream that we want to reach with the reason for existence for our organization. So for me, and I know that Richard Branson would agree here, it starts with happy employees. Because if you don't have happy employees, you will not have satisfied customers either. And you don't have anybody who could create the value for customers that would be necessary to have a profitable organization. A global investigation made by GALLUP called State of the Global Workforce is the name of this report. It was conducted last time in 2014 to 2016 in 155 countries all across the world. Hundreds of thousands of employees were part of this survey, and they come from all industries and all different kinds of roles and all different parts of the world. And this is the result. Only 15% on average in the world are engaged. 67% are indifferent, and 18% are actively disengaged. So These are alarming figures, of course. So you see that the actively disengaged people, we actually just want to get rid of them because they could do things to harm their employer. Of course, we need to take care of the green ones, the actively engaged people. But the big bunch in the middle, the 67%, here is where the real return on investment is. If we put our money there and help them to become more engaged, then we can really see some results on the bottom line. So this is how they did this investigation. They asked the same 12 questions to 230,000 employees from different industries. And the questions indicate the engagement level with the employees. And it's about clarity of goals. It's about growth and development opportunities. It's about feedback. And even if people have a best friend at work. So you see, the first question, I know what is expected from me at work. Number 2, I have the materials and equipment to do my work right. Number 3, at work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. That you have received praise and recognition for doing great work, or that somebody at work seems to care about me as a person. And there is somebody at work who encourages my growth and development, and my opinions seem to count, or the mission or purpose of my organization inspires me. You know, it's these things, and it's about leadership. It's really about how we see people, how we make it possible for them to perform and work in our organizational system. And it's not a lot about salaries in here. It's more actually about being seen, being heard, and being cared for as a human being, because these are our basic needs. So Gallup concludes in the same report that businesses that orient performance management systems around basic human needs for psychological engagement get the most out of their employees. And here it becomes really interesting, because basic human needs for psychological engagement, what are those really? And how are we going to find out? And what about motivation? What has that got to do with everything? In the end, the only thing that matters is motivation, finding those basic desires in people and being able to create conditions for living them in the system of work. The truth is that very little would be produced if we did not have motivation. So it should be built into the workplace, this motivation. It should be intrinsic, coming from inside of people. It makes you work harder when you have it, you know that. It's required for happiness. We cannot be happy if we don't get our psychological needs fulfilled. And it's based on want instead of need. It's something that we want to do from intrinsic motivation instead of something that we have to do because some manager tell me to do it, or I need to do this to get my salary. So what about this intrinsic or extrinsic motivation? Have you heard about that? Well, I would argue together with many other people that there is no such thing as extrinsic motivation. There could be extrinsic triggers that would trigger intrinsic basic needs, like status, for example. If I get a higher pay, I would get a better status. I could buy myself things that would give me the need for status, but it's still an intrinsic need of status. So all motivation is really intrinsic. So it comes from within, regardless of how it's triggered. You don't see the world as it is, but as you are. And this is through your own glasses and through your own value system. That means that we are all biased. We are all basically self-hugging. We think that our own psychological needs, our values, our personal values are the best. And that the world would be a better place if just everybody understood that. You know, so we're trying to impose our own values onto other people all the time. This is our bias. Dan Pink's recipe for motivation in Agile is very common to quote Dan Pink when we talk about motivation. I'm quite tired of that because it's so narrow. The definition here of motivation is very narrow. It's very general, very common. However, yes, they do motivate people. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose do, but it's only to a certain degree. And that degree is different in different people. So not everybody is highly motivated by purpose, for example. Some are, and some are less motivated by purpose. Also, there are many, many more things that motivate people. The tool I'm going to show you is the Rees motivation profile. And Stephen Rees found over 400 motives when he did his empirical research for the Rees motivation profile. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that instead of staying just with Dan Pink's recipe here. According to researcher Stephen Rees, we all have 16 basic needs that we all share in the whole world, just to a different degree. So it goes cross-cultural. And this is empirical studies made in the 90s. So it's modern research if you compare with other similar tests or personality assessments. So over 7,800 people in North America were asked anonymously about what motivates you and what makes you tick. Why do you do what you do? And what would contribute to your happiness in life? These were the questions that they were asked anonymously. And he then collected more than 400 different motives that people said, this is what motivates me. This is why I do what I do. And then he used statistical psychological factor analysis and did this research, scientific research. He wrote a number of scientific articles, which he then published in psychological magazines. And then he released this test in the beginning of 2000. This is the first empirically tested and validated taxonomy of human desires and motives. And each motivation profile is really like a fingerprint. It's very, very individual. I have done over 500 profiles to this date, and I've never seen anybody have the same profile as somebody else. So everybody's totally individual and unique as human beings, which is fascinating, really. You go through this electronic survey where you rate 128 different statements. So it's 8 per basic need. And it takes about 15 to 30 minutes to do it. And then you discuss your results in a coaching discussion with the Rees master. These needs or motives, Stephen Rees is quite practical here. He said that values, motives, needs, basic desires, they are so closely related, so you can't really see any clear difference between them. You want what you value, and you value what you want, he says. So needs and desires, motives and values are so close in definition. It shows your deepest values and also what you need for value-based happiness, and it motivates everything you do. And it occurs with a very varying degree of self-awareness. Some people are extremely aware of their basic needs and some are not. It's really interesting. You don't choose them, they just happen. By genetics and by your upbringing, you are shaped until around the age of 14 to 16 years. Then they are quite stable in your whole life after that. It's not just what you want, it's also how much you want it that would matter for your motivation. So the three findings from Stephen was that we all share these 16 basic needs. They are universal across the world. And they are intrinsic motives. around 160,000 people today, I need to update this slide, have done the RMP test. So the norm is pretty stable by now. It's also about the intensity of the motivation. And he worked a long time to form the statements to distinguish the people who were really motivated about something or from something from the ones that were, you know, moderately motivated by something. And then the self-hugging, the assumption that what is potentially best for me is also potentially best for everybody else. This is the bias that I talked about before. So we have the 16 basic needs, and these are the needs that you may need to make possible for everybody in the organization to live, regardless if they are high or low or in the middle. So this is a typical profile where we see that the darker blue color, it signals a high need for that motive. Light blue color signals a weak need for that motive. And in the middle, we have the orange color when it's neither high nor low need. That means that it can be situationally depending. So, for example, at work, I have a high degree of power, but not at home, if you are in the orange field. So it could be in different situations. You have the flexibility to be both high and low if you're in the middle. But the more you are high or low, the stronger that or weaker that basic need is. So there is no good or bad profile, or there are no good or bad basic needs. It's actually how we let the needs come out that makes the whole difference. How do we behave as a result from the basic needs? And this is something we can decide ourselves. We decide our behaviors. We decide our actions. So basic desire is not the same as behavior. But it will most of the time affect your behavior in some way. So do we let it come out in a way that has good or bad effects on our environment? So compare high power, and maybe Hitler was high on the need for power. Maybe also Nelson Mandela was high on the need for power and influence. So both of them were high on power, but they used it in two totally different ways. So the intensity of the need varies, but everybody has all the needs to some extent. Even if you have a very weak need for power, you still have the power need. But this is a normative curve. So you see in the middle, here's where most people are, 68%. And then we have 14% who has a strong versus weak need. And only 2% has a very strong or very weak need. Take the need for independence, for example. If we are have a very strong need for independence, we almost have no emotional alternative. So if you end up in the middle, you are situationally depending and don't have any clear preference. It may be that you show one side at work and one side at home, but the stronger or weaker a need is, the more you tend to behave according to that need. Although we can control behavior, don't forget about that. So weak independence means that you are more team-oriented, you like to work together, you have no problem getting help from other people. Whereas when you're high on independence, it means that you don't want to work in teams. You want to work alone, and you don't want help from other people. You want to be unique and special, and you want to do it yourself. Okay, we are going through the basic needs. And we are starting with power, which is the desire to influence and decide. So if you're high, have a high strive for power, you value competence, productivity, and excellence. They seek challenges. They work hard to accomplish their goals. They enjoy giving advice and may assume leadership roles. Typical personality traits include ambitious, assertive, hardworking, and determined. People with a weak need for power dislike self-assertion. They are non-directive. They dislike giving advice and may avoid positions of leadership. Since they value work-life balance, they tend to pursue goals that are less challenging. Typical personality traits include easygoing and laid back. Okay, so now we have the basic need of independence, the desire for self-reliance. This is something that motivates people to value their personal freedom and to make their own decisions. It also motivates attitudes toward individuality, or how important it is to the person to stand out as an individual. People with a strong desire are self-reliant. They place great value on their personal freedom and on their individuality, and they prefer to make their own decisions. They rarely seek advice from other people, and they also dislike being in need of others. They rely on logic rather than intuition. They tend to be rather stubborn and may be uncomfortable sharing their feelings. Typical personality traits include autonomous, independent, self-reliant, stubborn, and proud. People with a weak desire for independence are comfortable trusting others to meet their needs. They welcome psychological support, particularly when making decisions, and they dislike displays of individuality. Many value teamwork highly, and some are very sensitive to others' feelings and like to share their own emotions with close family and friends. We move on. We look at curiosity. This is the desire for understanding. As defined by Stevens' theory of motivation, the desire for curiosity is the need for intellectual activity. And people with a strong desire for curiosity value theoretical knowledge and ideas, regardless of practical relevance. They embrace intellectual stuff such as thinking, reading, writing, talking. They like to analyze complex issues, and they generally enjoy a wide range of intellectual interests, even though they may focus on a particular area of expertise. People with a weak need for curiosity dislike intellectual activity. They value action over thinking, simplicity over complexity, and practical knowledge over theoretical ideas. They tend to become frustrated if required to think for a sustained period of time. So more non-intellectual, more practical, and more action-oriented. Now we have the basic desire for acceptance. This is the desire for positive self-regard, and it motivates people to avoid criticism and rejection. It also motivates evaluation, anxiety. Children seek acceptance from parents, whereas adults seek acceptance from partners, peers, and colleagues. Acceptance is the basic desire most relevant to self-esteem. It's being valued for who we are, really. So if you have a strong desire for acceptance, you may lack self-confidence. You may be sensitive to failure, criticism, and rejection. And you could also be likely to become anxious during evaluations of different kinds. People with a weak desire for acceptance are self-confident, and they tend to view failure as a temporary setback. They remain secure in their ability to achieve their goals. So they also take negative feedback more constructively than somebody who would be high. And we have the need for order, the desire for organization. This is the desire for structure and stability, and it motivates people to plan, schedule, and organize things. If you have a strong desire for order, you value preparation, planning, and precision. They would write to-do lists or make schedules and approach tasks in a very methodical fashion. If you have a weak desire for order, you can be more flexible. You may dislike planning, organizing, and scheduling, and also activities that require precision and repetition. So instead, they prefer spontaneity and improvisation. They have a high tolerance for ambiguity and tend to change direction frequently and focus on the big picture rather than details. So more flexibility here. Basic desire for saving is the desire to collect things, and saving influences how well people also take care of the things they own, as well as their attitude toward spending. So
I text you guys. I'm like, I hear you laughing. I'm like, I should probably text them and tell them that this couldn't come out in a few minutes.
Hello? Yes, somebody wanted to say something? No? Okay, so people with a strong desire for saving are collectors. They may collect objects, you know, stamps, books, coins, religious relics, sports, things. They generally value things and devalue wastefulness. If you have a weak desire for saving, you are not motivated to collect things. You want to be free from property, and you tend to use things and then dispose of them. They can be more generous. Or if you're on the other side, you would say that they are careless with their personal belongings. They may enjoy spending more. You want to be generous with everything that you have, maybe information, maybe sharing stuff with other people, giving away stuff. Whereas somebody who is has a high drive, they would instead try to keep it for themselves. Then we have honor, the desire for upright character, which motivates people to embrace moral codes of conduct, to be loyal to their parents, for example, other ancestors, and take pride in their ethnic heritage. So if you have this strong desire, you would do your duty, even when it requires personal sacrifice. Rather than making excuses or blaming others for their mistake, they would accept responsibility for their actions. People who have a weak desire for honor place great value on experience. They look for opportunities that benefit them, and sometimes they could take a shortcut, but they would call it working smart. So the why is more important here. Basic desire for idealism is the desire for social justice. It motivates people to become involved in social causes, to pay attention to current events and support charities. So if you have a strong desire for idealism, you place great value on fairness and equality and on helping other groups of people. They could support charities, for example, maybe donating money, but also by volunteering their time. If you have a weak desire for idealism, you may be more focused on events in your own life than on issues that would affect society. They set the world for what it is. They think that efforts to address social inequality are unlikely to be successful. They are dreamers, people who think so. And they maintain that the downtrodden must work to improve their own lives without relying on others. Okay, so we have the next one, which is social contact. This one is easy. I think you understand extroversion and introversion. So it's the basic desire for companionship with peers. If you have a strong desire, you are a friendly person. You take a strong interest in others. You tend to develop excellent skills, interpersonal skills, and you seek an active social life. People with a weak desire for social contact enjoy solitude instead. They value their privacy. They prefer interacting with a few close friends rather than socializing with many acquaintances. And usually they're in a more serious mood. They like to work alone and are more likely to play an individual rather than a team sport. And then we have family. Desire to raise one's own children motivates people to spend time with their children and to place their children's needs before their own. So if you have a strong desire for family, you value parenthood, you are exceptionally attentive to your children's needs. They also want to spend a lot of time with their children. If you have a weak desire for family, you may feel that parenthood is a bit burdensome. They may not want to have children at all. But if they do have children, they may spend little time with their children or raising them. So could be absent parents if you're low here. The desire for status is the desire for respect based on social standing. And it motivates people to value wealth and fame and prestige. People with a high need here, they would want to feel important, and they embrace materialistic values and are motivated to acquire status symbols of wealth by, for example, a nice house, nice car, wearing designer clothes, and they are impressed by fame and popularity. People with a weak desire for status are usually unimpressed with high society and wealth and fame. They often reject materialistic values and don't care about prestige levels of the products they purchase. More down to earth, more about equality and fairness. And we are moving towards the end here. Vengeance, winning, the desire to win and get even. It's the desire to confront those who frustrate or offend us. And people with a strong desire for vengeance are quick to confront other people. They are highly competitive, maybe. They place great value on winning and often compare themselves to others. Some exhibit physically aggressive behavior. But people with a weak desire for vengeance are motivated instead to avoid conflicts. They are peacemakers and they value cooperation over competition, and they dislike comparing themselves to other people. Beauty, the desire for beauty is the desire for aesthetically appealing experiences and motivates an interest in art or design or fashion. They can care deeply about the attractiveness of their environment, and they place an uncommonly high value on beautiful people, places, and things. If you're low on the beauty need or have a weak desire for beauty, you pay little attention to attractiveness of their environment, may not be interested in art or design. They may be content with simple or surroundings, and they tend to dress in a comfortable clothes, little consideration about whether or not they are fashionable. So function over form, or form over function. How much do you value each of these? Then we have eating, the desire to consume food. People with a strong desire for eating have hearty appetites and enjoy many different kinds of foods. They're eager to try new foods from different cultures and may spend a lot of time thinking about their next meal. They may like to cook, they may post interesting recipes on social media, and they may subscribe to cooking magazines. People with a weak desire instead for eating, they have a little interest in food. Since they derive such little enjoyment from eating, they tend to eat much less than the average person. They sometimes miss meals because they simply forget to eat, and they may have a limited diet. And then we have physical activity. the desire to exercise of muscles. It motivates people to engage in physically vigorous activities such as sports. So people with a strong desire seek an active lifestyle. They enjoy exercising on a regular basis and usually play one or more sports. It's common. They value physical strength, fitness, vitality, and stamina. And their personality traits typically include active, energetic, athletic, physical fit, and vital. People who have a weak desire for physical activity prefer a sedentary lifestyle, and they would like to conserve energy by moving as little as possible. They prefer desk jobs and often choose hobbies that involve little movement. And the last one is tranquility, the desire for emotional calm. This is the scale that are used by the American defense, military defense, when they hire and recruit people. They look at this scale. They always use this one for every recruitment they do, to make sure that they are not too high and not too low either, because high need for tranquility is when you place a very high value on your personal safety. You may worry about becoming ill or injured or having a low tolerance for pain, and you tend to develop many fears, fear of animals or heights or flying. You may have difficulty coping with stress and prefer activities that would involve little pressure. People with a weak desire for tranquility are risk takers. They may be fearless or have a high capacity for handling stress, and they enjoy activities that provide excitement and adventure. In general, they don't worry about the possibility of becoming sick or experiencing physical pain. So what can we do with this? Since everybody's so different and nobody has the same profile as anybody else, this is really very unique. So what we can do is to do this kind of exercises where we reveal our profiles, and we can show it to our peers and do an exercise that I call the washing instructions, which is very, very good to do. What you do is you think about your do's and your don'ts, like a washing instruction. You know, every piece of clothing has a little note in them saying how they should be treated. Do this with me, but don't do that. And this is the same thing. The do's and don'ts of a person derived from a person's profile, translated to preferred behaviors from other people. We use flip chart for this exercise, and then we put it on the walls. It's also extremely helpful when it comes to identifying conflicts in conflict coaching. It's most of the time it's a difference in personal values that come from different basic desires and needs. So if you're on, one person is on the higher side and another person on the lower side, they have a very difficult time understanding each other's perspective, and that's why we have conflicts with each other. Also in leadership, this is extremely important. How shall we talk to somebody who is high or low on a basic need? What shall we do with them? What kind of work would they be happy in or passionate about? So there is a lot we can use this for in a company, in a business setting. So this is an example of a washing instruction. It's actually my own washing instruction. Do this with me, but don't do this. And when you know these things about each other, it becomes much easier to also accept and use each other's differences to the strength of the whole team, instead of having conflicts. You know, you see that, okay, this is a different perspective and that could bring us value. Together, we can cover a bigger a greater perspective so that we can create more value for customers, which is the goal in the end. In 1936, Kurt Lewin published this equation: behavior is a function of a person in their environment. It's one of the most well-known formulas in social psychology. And what does it teach us? Well, to change behavior of a person, you need to consider both the person and their environment. So what can we do here? Can we change a person's personality? Probably not. We can probably just change the environment. So don't manage people, manage the system is what we learn here. People have their basic needs and desires. They are the way they are. And it's very difficult to change a person. But we can make it easy for people to behave in new ways if we form the environment and the system in such a way so that it's easy. That means that we need to work with processes, IT systems, the physical environment, tools, methods, and models, so that it becomes easy to express yourself, be yourself, and live your basic needs also at work. So this is a question that I could send with you here. How could you change the environment to change people's behaviors? And how do you make it easy to behave in ways that would strengthen your organizational values by tapping into personal values? A last slide. Regardless how different you are from each other, you need to remember certain things, that the other person who may be very different from you has also beliefs, perspectives, and opinions, just like you have. They have hope, they have anxieties, they have vulnerabilities, also just like you have. They have friends, family, and perhaps children who love them, just like you. They want to feel respected and appreciated and competent, just like you. And they also wish for peace, joy, and happiness, just like you. So in that, we are all united and exactly the same. Okay, so we invite you to Agile People and join us at agilepeople.com. That's what I wanted to say, the last thing today. With that, I will open up for questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
Great presentation, by the way. Great
Thank
presentation.
you.
I have a two-part question. We talked about the motivations of individuals, but how do we motivate a team that is supposed to move as one? Scrum calls for us to move like a scrum huddle in rugby. So the team essentially becomes one. So how do we get individuals to move as one?
I think you do that by using every person's strengths in the best possible way, to make people find their strength and do that and play with the others in a way, just like a rugby team, where you see somebody is a faster runner than somebody else, let them run fast. Somebody is a better catcher than somebody else, let them catch the rugby ball or whatever. You see what I mean? So the thing that you like to do the most is probably something that you also are quite good at, because if you find it, if you're passionate about something and interested in something, you also become good at that. And then you become strong at it. And it's probably something that you are motivated by in your core. If you're motivated by structure and order, let the person keep track of schedules and stuff like that. Nobody else wants to do it anyway, you know?
The second part of the question is, would you recommend periodic one-on-ones with individual team members so that you could actually garner that individual value?
Yeah, I would recommend that you understand each other deeply. How you do that is, there are different ways to get to know people deeply, but knowing people deeply is a recipe that I can always recommend. Because when you get to know people deeply, you start to like people, right? And when you like people, you work better together. And when you work better together, you produce better value together. So getting to know people, getting to know their basic desires and needs becomes crucial for good teamwork, I would say. It's not enough to know your name, that you live somewhere, you have a dog and a wife or whatever, 2 children. That's not enough. I need to know what makes you tick. Why do you do what you do? Something more, something deeper, so that we can take that into account when we decide who should work on what and how shall we cooperate and how do we treat each other in the team. Then you have the chance to become a high-performing team and run together as a team. And also understanding the people who are highly independent, for example. What do we do with them in an agile organization where we have decided that it's always about working in a team? And then you're highly independent. You don't like working in teams. You don't like when people are asking you for help. You don't want to share your knowledge. You know, this is a basic need maybe for you if you're highly independent. High need for independence means that you want to be unique, special, and you don't want to be like everybody else. So then we need to handle that somehow. The worst possible thing is to force that person into teamwork. That's the worst thing you can do. Then it's better to say, okay, we have a thing that you can do here all by yourself. Go and do that, and then we'll coordinate with the rest of us because the rest of us are team workers.
Thank you for your answers.
Mm-hmm.
Got a question about, you talked about the leadership quality. One of the things that I run into quite a bit, especially as an agile coach, is management and their command and control. I mean, yes. To me, command and control, which I see a lot in managers because I don't think they've ever been trained as managers, clearly don't understand leadership. I mean, for myself, one of the things that I learned on a personal level is that in the Navy, okay, my evaluation as an aviator was just one slot on that evaluation. The rest of it had to do with my ground job. Mm-hmm. So my job performance was based not on me personally, but how well my team performed. So for me, leadership is about creating an environment that allows people to do the best they can, to step up. Not all will, but they will. But then so many just confuse it with command and control. I want you to do this, do that, do that.
Yeah. No, definitely. That's very true. So the qualities and the skills that took leaders to where they are today, most leaders, is maybe their high power, high status, etc. But that is not the leadership that is it's going to be successful in the future of work. It's more about removing impediments for people, to making it possible for people to acquire the competencies that they need and work well together. So it's more about servant coaching leadership for the future of work, definitely. But it's not easy to just change a manager's mindset like that, just shift, because they've been working like this for many years and they have been successful doing that, right? So, and they are the only ones who can change the structures that would also make it possible for them to be more agile or think with more agile values and work more with the agile principles. So, and as long as they don't have the mindset, they will not change those structures. So it's a catch-22, right?
Understood. I guess one of the things that I'm looking at is dealing with management a lot more. And one of the things that I'm looking at is actually, as part of the Agile transformation, I realize how I'm reading your book, by the way, too. But,
okay, great.
But that one of the things that's critical on a on a project I'm currently working on now is that when we go ahead and do the transition, one of the things we need to do is retrain the management. And the other thing that we need to do is we need to go ahead and change how they're appraised, rather than being appraised as, okay, the number of people that they're in charge of, or this, that, the other thing. My thought is to go ahead and base their appraisal on how well their teams have performed. Because what I'm looking for that manager to do is to go ahead and be the person to remove key impediments quickly.
Mm-hmm. Appraisals are difficult, and I'm an advocate of removing performance appraisals. We don't need them anymore, actually.
No, I agree.
Yeah. So the question is, why do you appraise teams even? We definitely shouldn't appraise people on an individual level, but we should also not appraise teams, because you can't really compare one team to another. They have totally different goals. They have totally different people, and you can't really compare different teams with each other.
Let me rephrase that then.
Perform better than the other one.
No, let me rephrase. Okay, based on the value that they delivered, because one of the things that I'm looking at in terms of transitioning the team to help business and IT work together is for business to understand the value that IT brings, okay, to the work they do on an operational level.
But how can you compare value that one team is creating with value that another team is creating? How could you know how difficult it was to create that value? And in that situation they were, and maybe they didn't have the competence, and maybe that was the manager's fault, and maybe, you know, there are so many maybes here. So
now there is.
I would find it very difficult to calculate the value that a team is creating. How would you know? And what were the conditions that made it possible or not for them to create that value? So, and what were they doing exactly the same task for exactly the same client in exactly the same time? Then maybe you can compare a little bit, but otherwise it's impossible.
Well, in some cases, yes. In a number of cases, I'm finding out no. Mm-hmm. Very simply because one of the things I'm sitting down with is the teams and asking them, actually sitting down with them and asking them what value they bring to their organization. What problems are they solving? Mm-hmm. And it's their information, not mine, not my. Okay. So using that, and the other thing that I've been using is, okay, value drivers, key performance indicators. Now, key performance indicator, just, okay, are we heading in the right direction? You know, and basically correcting, and also being able to go ahead and say, you provide this value, okay, that this is the outcome that's occurring as a result of the value you bring through your work. The whole idea here in my mind is the objective is that IT has always been considered a cost overhead. And we probably have accounting to thank for that or not. And the way I'm trying to move forward is to have them understand that IT is an investment. It's not a cost overhead. That is as critical to business as the operational side, as the business side. So
yeah, what you mean. So you want to show really the value that each team is bringing to the table here. I understand. Yes. So the reason is not to compare one team with the other.
No, it isn't.
It's
to go ahead and kind of realign the manager's thinking regarding what makes him successful.
Great. Yes, I agree with you. It's important to visualize and show what people are bringing to the table, and to show it to management so that they understand that they're there for fun. Or
one of the things I love about my job is I never stop learning.
Yeah,
I never stop looking for other ways to go ahead and improve things or
Yeah.
change understanding.
That's the great advantage of being a coach, right? That you,
Yeah,
you
true.
learn all the time. With every new team, with every new person you meet, you learn all the time. It's amazing.
Yeah, the perennial student.
Yeah, student for life.